So in this section, we're going to be talking about removing the head. We're going to go through and step by step, we're going to replace the head on this open back banjo. What we're going to do is we're going to start off describing what tools that we're going to be using to get going on this project. And the tools that I'm going to be using is, of course, I'm going to be using a small little needle nose plier and a wire cutter. I have a small Phillips screw. This little T-wrench right here is the wrench that I can use to tighten or loosen the tightening hooks. But I also have a nut driver, which for me, in my old chunky hands, is a lot easier to use. So I'm using a 1/4-inch nut driver. I'm going to be tightening up the screws that hold down the shoes for all the tensioning hooks. And on this particular banjo, a short Phillips is going to do the job for me. At some point, we're going to be setting the angle of the strings with the adjustable bridge. So I went out and I bought this general, very inexpensive protractor. You can get these at Home Depot or Lowe's or places like that, but they're very valuable. And I'm going to be adjusting the coordinator rod. And in this particular banjo, I need two 14mm wrenches. So I'm going to be using wrenches rather than adjustable wrenches. When you adjust the coordinating rod, you can hold it in place by using a nail. In this case, I have a little awl that's going to fit through a hole, so I can put that there and actually hold it while I'm tightening up the nuts for the coordinator rod. So I have an awl that I'm going to use. I also have one nut down here that is a 10mm, so I'm going to be using that. Now with these tools here, I can pretty much disassemble this entire banjo. And these are the main tools I'm going to be working with. Later on, I will be using a little vise. And although this particular vise is something that you would buy in a luthier supply store, any small vise will work, because I want to use that to hold my bridge to do a couple of different projects on it. And I'm also going to be using a little Dremel with a little bit of a grinding tool later on. And I'm going to be using this to just give you an idea how you can modify slightly the, the intonation on the bridge. So we'll be talking about that. Other than that, these are all the tools I'm going to be using. The only specialized tool that you may or may not only find in a luthier shop is going to be this little torque wrench right here. And this torque wrench with the right size socket on it is going to give me the ability to adjust the torque on all of these wrenches. Now, as a professional, I use this as somebody who is just going to be sitting in their living room and just setting up their banjo. You don't really need it. We can get by without it. But that's what I use to set up a banjo. So just give me a second. We're going to get set up and we're going to start disassembling the banjo. Hold on. When you disassemble a banjo, I try to use a sort of a methodical method of doing it, which saves me a lot of time and grief later on. And one of the things I learned to do is that when you're changing your head or you're setting up a banjo, you have individual screws or sometimes bolts that are going to hold the individual shoes in place. They can loosen up. And if they're all loose, and you want to tighten them up after you take the head off, it's going to be very difficult to get them all in the upright or straight position. Now, here we are, we're getting ready to start, and they're all in the right position, and each tensioning hook is holding it in that place. Now is the time to tighten the screws. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go around and tighten each screw before I even disassemble it. If I had to do this with the head off and the tension hooks off, it can be a pain in the neck, because you have a lot of shoes that may be loose, and I would have to really pay attention and get each one in a straight upright position. So this is going to make it a lot easier for me down the road. So once I tighten all these with my little tiny Phillips screwdriver, I can pretty much forget about them. And when I go back to assemble it, everything is going to be right where it should be. I'm not over tightening, I'm just firmly snugging them down. All firm. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my nut driver, and just so you realize, I've already taken the strings off. I've already taken the bridge, wherever it may be, and put it aside. And apparently I put it aside somewhere very safe. I've already taken the bridge and taken that off, and I've taken the tailpiece off. We have one nut to take off for the tailpiece. It has a bracket that was right here. I just took this off, and I'm going to put this aside here. Now there are different kinds of tailpieces, so take a close look at your tailpiece and try to figure out how to get it off. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to take and I'm going to loosen, that was a good one, all the hooks. Now this one here is binding up on me. So if I were to take, we can pretty much assured that something is wrong with this if it binds up. It didn't loosen up. So I'm going to take an adjustable wrench, put it on the hook, and I'm going to loosen it completely. Okay. And I'm going to take it off and put it over here because I know there's a problem with that one. When I loosen these, they should end up being very loose, and it should require no force at all to loosen the nut. If I get one that binds up, I have a problem, and I want to fix it before I put it back on. I'm either going to replace it, or I'm going to see what the problem is, and perhaps it just needs a bit of oil, because it's going to fake me out in terms of the torque that I'm applying to the banjo head. So you don't want to use any of these hooks where the nut is binding up after the hook is loosened. So we're going right around, loosening these right up. And again, going back to what I did by tightening the shoes now, if I had to square away all those shoes after I've loosened all of these, it would be a pain in the neck, and it would take me twice as long to do this job. And now I don't even have to think about it. So far, all of these are good, with the exception of that one hook. And I'm going to guess that that one hook probably has a bad thread, or maybe just needs a little bit of oil, but something's amiss. So we're going to do this. Now, if your guitar was a resonator, you would have taken your resonator off, and you probably would have needed either a Phillips screwdriver or a flat-bladed screwdriver. You would have taken the 3 or 4 or 2 bolts, depending upon how it's made, loosened the 4 bolts, taken the resonator right off, and then turned it around. So the only difference between doing an open back and a resonator is just removing the resonator. The brackets stay in place. So now we've got all the screws loosened. We're going to take this and I'm going to flip it around. Okay. And in this particular case, the armrest is held on by 2 hooks. So I'm going to loosen these hooks and lift it up. Might have to take on this one. I might have to take the hook completely off. Let's see if I can get this. Oh, there we are. There's one hook. And there's 2 hook. Okay, so we take the armrest completely off. And I'm going to just take all the hooks and just move them off to the side. Okay. We got one stubborn one here. Let me get that. Now, when talking about hooks, these are the good hooks. These are solid. They're not stamped. They're a nice, strong hook. You will see hooks that the halfway up the stem, it's sort of stamped and flattened out, and the stamping continues around the edge of the hook, and they tend to be very, very weak. And they can be very frustrating because you go to tighten down the head, and the hooks straighten out and they pull right off. In that case, if you find a hook or a set of hooks that tends to pull off, you're probably better off getting a better set of hooks. They aren't terribly expensive. You usually buy the hooks in a complete set, and by investing in a good set of hooks down the road, it's going to save you a lot of time and labor and frustration and new words that your children may learn in the living room, because you'll be swearing left and right if you have the type of hooks that are tend to pull off. Now, we had talked earlier about the gap between the tightening ring and the edge of the neck. And this one here, once it's all tightened down, there was still a little bit of a gap. So after we go to put this back on, I'm going to be taking a look in there and checking the gap. However, in this one, the tightening ring is going to pull right off. So we can put that aside, leaving us the head. And if you notice, the Remo logo was positioned on this one, so the logo was directly underneath the tailpiece. Other people like the logo, and they will turn it around and have it up here so you could see it. It's strictly whatever you like, your artistic sense. Now, whenever you take the head off, okay, don't throw it away real quick, because 9 times out of 10, the tone ring is going to be right underneath it. And this tone ring, as we can see here, fits in a slot just like this. And this is what gives us a lot of the power that is going to come out of our banjo. And this is a brass tone ring. Traditionally, tone rings were brass. The reason being that in order to get a calfskin head on it, you had to take and wet the calfskin, drape it over, and if the tone ring was steel or it was iron, it would rust, because you're wetting it down, and then when it dries out, it just tightens up that much more. So traditionally, they made the tone rings out of brass or bronze, so it doesn't rust. And this is what is going to give us the power and projection from the instrument. So this is the brass tone ring. And as we saw on the earlier open back banjo, it was just a rod that went around. And probably the most important thing you want to make sure about the tone ring is just feel around the edges. You want no sharp edges. You don't want anything that is going to grab the inside of the head as we're tightening it up. If it does, it could tear. So you just want to take your time, feel around. If you find something sharp, just take a little bit of fine sandpaper. I mean, we're talking 1,000 grit sandpaper here. Smooth it down and then polish it off with some metal polish. We want this to be absolutely smooth. Okay. And this is actually a very thin tone ring. I mean, we can have tone rings that are extremely thick. The more expensive the guitar or banjo, the heavier and more robust the tone ring is. Sometimes it'll be chrome plated, but it'll be brass. They say bell brass, the same kind of brass that bells are made out of. So here's our basic rim. And so our next step is that we're going to be taking a look and try to figure out what kind of replacement head that we're going to use. So we'll be right back. Okay, we've measured our crown, and What we're looking at is we're looking at the distance between the top of the flush ring and the very top of the head itself. And if I measure this one, it measures in at about 1/2 inch. And if I take the new one, lo and behold, she measures in at 1/2 inch. This is called a high collar, and we have a high collar and we have a low collar. And those are the two general types of heads that you can buy. Although when you look, you look in the Remo catalog, the people who make these different size heads, they have quite a few different typed heads to choose from. So if you have a very old banjo, it's something to look closely at. Make sure that you've got the right head. Whatever you do, the tension ring, don't throw this away. You can't replace this very easily. And again, when you take the head off, the old head, chances are it may have the tone ring sitting inside here, so you want to pull that out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the obvious choice of centering the name Remo, and I'm just going to take 2 hooks on each side and just tighten it down slightly. And we'll come over here, and I'll grab another hook, about 180 degrees from it. Hold it in place. I'll take this hook, hold it in place. Okay. And I'm just tightening it up snugly with my fingers. Okay. And we're going to grab one more hook on this side, so we've got 4 opposing hooks that are going to get us started. Okay. And my Remo is centered. Again, I may have made the obvious choice of putting the Remo insignia down here. I'm just going to make sure that it is in fact centered. Okay. And with these little hooks in place, I'm just going to stretch it down over the tone ring a little bit. Okay, now I'm going to take the hooks off. And I just used the 4 hooks to help me center the tone ring, or center the head, as I pushed it down on the tone ring. Because sometimes this particular tone ring, like some other ones you'll run into, can be a little bit wobbly, especially if it's not an expensive banjo. Now, that said, I can take my tensioner and place that where I want to. And we seem to be in a little bit better figure. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to bring up my opposing hooks with the tensioner on. Now, on some banjos, and we really have to back off on this to get this up there, to get it down. That's why I use the hooks without the tensioner first. In fact, this one actually fell right off. I'm going to try to push that down, catch a couple of threads. Okay, good. All right. Okay, push it in lightly. Grab another one over here. Now, in some guitar or banjos, gotta get banjos on my mind here. On some banjos, the neck is going to have a matching slot right in the tensioning hoop. So you want to make sure that's lined up here. This particular case, it does not, so we don't have to worry about it. Okay. Now we're going to bring this down, get a hook on it there, and we're starting to cover up the tone ring. So the new head has got to sort of stretch slightly over the tone ring. It's sort of a little bit of a compression fit, so you want to just take your time and make sure it's going to be evenly down before we start cranking on these screws. Okay. A little bit more. Okay, got it on. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it, put her on its side. This vise, by the way, is padded, so it's not like I'm taking and putting the banjo in a steel vise. This whole vise is padded, so it's not hurting anything. And I'm just going to slightly tighten these up, these 4 hooks that are opposing each other. Okay. And all I'm looking for at this point is I'm trying to get the top down over the tone ring. That's all I'm trying to do. And I'm looking for a snugness. I'm not trying to tighten anything up yet. I just want to pull it down over the tone ring and get it snugly in place. Okay. And so far it looks like it's snugging up on it. Okay. Now I'm going to go through and I'm going to put all my hooks in place. And I'm not going to tighten them up yet. I'm just going to bring them up snug. And I'm going to go all the way around and do this. So I'll be back in a few minutes after I have snugged all my hooks up very, very lightly. Hardly turning this at all. I just want all my hooks in place so I can start the process of tightening up the hook. So we'll be back in a minute. Okay, we've got all of the tensioning hooks barely snugged down. And at this point, if you were to shake it, you shouldn't hear anything rattle. The only thing that might be loose is because it's held on by by 2 hooks, is going to be the armrest. Everything else should be just snug enough so it stopped rattling. There's no rattles at all. But we haven't tightened it yet. We've just snugged them up. And I've taken the time after I snugged them up to make sure that each one is straight up and down. I've also taken a look to make sure that we have snugged up evenly all the way around, and we're ready to begin the tightening process. And everybody has different ways of doing the tightening. Some people will start at one end and just keep going around and around in a big circle. I prefer going across opposite tuners or opposite tighteners. That works better for me. So I'm just going to do it the way I do it. And basically what I do is I just take a magic marker and I just put a little dot dead center on the coordinator rod. That way I can always take a ruler and put it right across, and I'm going to turn quarter turn as I go across, and I'm going to go a quarter turn each one, and this way I can see where everything is. And I did check out that hook that was binding up on me, and all it needed was a little bit of oil. So that said, it's in good shape. Okay. And we started here, so we're going to go to here. Okay. Now you do, when you get a banjo, you do get the little tightening wrench that you can use. This one here works just as good. Has a lot of leverage though, so I tend to use this until I get to a point where I'm happy that everything is going together okay. And before you go any farther, let's just turn it over and let's just take a look. And notice that if I press in on the top at this point, and by all means make sure your fingers are clean because the tops will pick up dirt and grease very easily, I can actually depress anywhere on here, the head, so I know it's not even anywhere near tight. Primarily what I'm looking for is to be able to press down like that and only deflect it a very tiny bit. Now as I go around, each turn is going to be about a quarter of a turn. Your mark on the coordinator rod will put you in the right neighborhood so you don't miss something. And this is going to give us a very even way of tightening the hooks as we go across. And again, I'm not even thinking about using that torque rod or torque wrench yet. I'm still a ways away from that. I'm just concentrating on making sure that this new head is snugged down solidly and evenly on my tone ring. And from looks of it, everything is nice. At this point, it's still not overly tight, so you can go around and just make sure that all your hooks are straight up and down. Okay, they all look copacetic, and this one's a little crooked, so we'll change it. Just loosen it. Okay, there we go. This one's a little crooked. Loosen it. So we're going slow with the tightening process because this is going to give us the chance to make sure the hooks are straight. Everything is going on snugly. It's nice and even going down. One sure giveaway is going to be look at the edge here all the way around the tension ring, and everything should be pretty much the same distance from the top to the very edge of the tension ring. Check our starting to tighten up on us. Still got a lot of play, but we'll keep going. We'll go around again. And once you get this tight, you might find that you'll come back in a week or so, sometimes even a couple of days, and it's going to be looser, and you might have to just catch it up. It's like tightening a drum. It could be worse. This could be a calfskin head, and you'd be in misery. And that's no exaggeration. And just to talk about heads for a minute, if you look on the inside of your new head, you're going to notice that the inside is very glossy and it's very clear. And that's because the head, when it comes off the manufacturing process, initially is clear. It's perfectly clear. And let me get ahead and I'll show you. Okay, so when it comes off the manufacturing process, this is nice and glossy because this is actually clear. It's transparent. This frostiness is actually sprayed on. It's a type of lacquer that's actually sprayed on top of the clear mylar, which gives it this old-fashioned type of look that most people are imagining a banjo should look like. So this is really just an illusion. This is just simply a lacquer that's sprayed on here to give it the old-fashioned kind of look. You can buy heads where The lacquer is either put on thick or it's put on very lightly. You can buy heads that are amber color. You can buy heads that are perfectly clear. The less material that you have on the head, the brighter the sound. So you might, and actually the thinner it is. So if you took for instance, a perfectly clear head, it's probably only about 6.5 thousandths thick. Whereas the heavier coat Remo head may be somewhere about 14 thousandths of an inch thick. So the coating does make a difference in the tone. The less coating or no coating ends up with a much brighter sound. So you know, as a banjo player, you have the option of choosing whatever kind of coating that you want on it and whatever kind of thickness. Again, going back to what I was saying earlier, you can sort of choose the type of tone that you want to get out of your banjo. So we will continue our tightening process some more. Okay. We'll go around for the third or fourth time. The ruler just helps me keep my place. And once you get a certain age, you need things like that. There we go. And by going in very small amounts, all we're trying to do is guaranteeing that as we tighten this up, we are in fact going to put this in a position where everything is going on nice and smoothly. And every time you go through one tightening process, check the head. I can still depress this. Starting to sound like a drum now. Okay. At this point, I'm going to use my torque wrench, and I can actually dial in the amount of torque now. And now that I got it all even around, I'm just going to go in a big circle and just go in. And I'm just going to go to take each one up to about 7 centimeters on this. Okay. And all this is doing is really nailing down that we have the same amount of pressure on each screw. And I really can't give you a number on this, and the reason why is because if I did, you could run into a problem. Because sometimes the threads and nuts on the tension hooks are coarse thread, and sometimes the threads and nuts are fine thread. And if I gave you a number what the torque should be, when you start tightening up something that has fine threads, it is actually going to end up putting a lot more force or pull on the head. So can't really give you a number. I'm just making sure that as I go along, whatever I'm doing, everything is getting the same amount of pressure. That's more important to me. And I'm going to rely on my feel I can go more. Not bad. Okay, not bad. I'm going to go around one more. And I'm going to bring this up to 10. Okay. If for any reason we don't have an even torque across this, then we're not going to get an even sound. And that becomes more important. Okay. Good. Okay. As sort of brings me back to the days when I was a foreign car mechanic, torquing the cylinder head. Same thing. Although we had a specific torque to go to. Now there are people out there that when, professional banjo players, that you ask them, how tight should the head be? And some people will say, well, I make it as tight as I can just before the head breaks. And a lot of people will say, if you heard that little noise that I just made right there, when I hear that noise, I stop. So let's see what happens. Still kind of tight. Okay. So I think I'm going to leave it at that for the moment. It seems very tight to me. It doesn't depress anywhere I press down, and everywhere I press, I seem to have the same amount of pressure. After you put a couple of heads on, you'll get more familiar with it. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put the strings on. We're going to string it up, and we're going to go through and just go through the process of where do we put the bridge, because that tends to be a big problem when you buy a new guitar or new banjo. When you buy a new banjo, generally the bridge, in most cases, if you get it from the manufacturer or it's shipped to you, the bridge is going to be laid down and the strings are going to be tightened across it. And they're going to leave it up to you to position the bridge. And if you just stick it on anywhere and you tighten up the strings and you adjust the strings to perfect tuning, when you go to play it, you're going to find it's out of tune. And what we need to do is we need to place the bridge where it's going to have the perfect intonation. And that's kind of easy to do once you know how to do it. So our next section is going to be on replacing the strings and setting the bridge. We'll be back in a while.